Before I begin, I'm going to preemptively rebut any counterargument that goes along the lines of, well, this was actually introduced in the expanded universe in X book Y years ago. Don't care. A claim that an element of storytelling is illogical, hackneyed, or just generally poor writing is not countered by the fact that said element was first introduced in the EU. First, Disney nuked the EU, so all of that truly can't be used to defend the current canon. Second, and more importantly, just because something was done before doesn't mean it isn't bad now. If a boss sees his employee printing out emails from clients and putting them in the toaster and says, "Why would you do that? That's dumb," and the employee says, "Well, I've done this lots of times," or "Another guy did it last year," it doesn't make putting printed out emails in the toaster not dumb. It just means that the boss wasn't aware of how stupid his employee was until then. He wouldn't say, "Well, I guess if we've been doing it up to this point, there's no reason to stop it now." Well, I'm the boss, sauce, Lucasfilm is the employee, and how Disney has handled the Force is slightly dumber than putting printed out emails in a toaster.
Let's begin.
Building a world for a fictional story can be done with varying levels of complexity. The world you create can be as similar or as different to our own world as you want. Some fictional stories, like Rain Man or Seven, simply use the world we live in as its setting, which means the only world building that needs to be done in the writing is that which pertains on the micro level to the characters we're following. What does their world look like as a detective or a man with a savant brother? Some fictional stories, like James Bond, use our world but make subtle changes in the scope and power of certain organizations and stretch the advancement of technology. Notice when it does this, 007's weapons are set up and explained well before he uses them. Other fictional stories take on the task of building a whole new world, incredibly different from what we know in our own mundane lives. And if you're going to build a world with orcs and hobbits and wizards and dwarves, you're going to have to really flesh it out. It's going to take time to decide what dynamics dictate the relations between all these different races. You're going to have to construct a magic system and stick to it, so that your audience can rely upon it and accurately incorporate it into their investment into the stakes of your story. I mean, it wouldn't hurt to invent a language, or, 15, to really build your world from the ground up if you want it to be really good. Basically, you're going to have to write a lot of story that never makes it into the final print. You'll need to keep a whole history in mind that has no great significance to your audience, but which guides you as you write your story. Like I said, this includes systems of magic. Despite not being explored deeply in Lord of the Rings, Lord of Ring, the magic used is clearly bound by rules. For the elves, their use of magic is constrained to their great ability to create things like weapons and armor. The wizards had great power, but again, theirs don't really get much explanation for how they use it and what its scope is. This works, though, because it's contained. Gandalf doesn't use any insane magic to make the rest of the Fellowship's roles seem obsolete. The wizards' magic is mostly displayed in their own contained conflicts, as their existence is above that of the other characters, like angels in the Bible. On the flip side, Harry Potter dedicates large portions of the stories to explaining the magic system, specifically how to use it. We spend time with the characters going to different classes, and because they are young students learning all of it alongside us, the introductions of greater uses of it in the later books and movies isn't inherently a problem. The fact that the existence of Veritaserum, which is truth serum for those of you that don't know, isn't mentioned until the fourth book doesn't stretch our suspension of disbelief. Harry is learning about the depth of this magical world as he goes. There is magic he can't understand until he's built a stronger foundation of knowledge. Now, I don't mean to suggest that these two magic systems are perfect. Far from it. J.R.R. Tolkien himself worried he had, quote, been far too casual about magic, and especially the use of the word, unquote, in one of his letters to Naomi Mitchison. And liquid luck and time turners definitely come to mind for Harry Potter. I'm just giving examples of how magic can be handled in stories. In Star Wars, the first movie serves as the cornerstone for building the magic system known as the Force. So let's see how it's built up, and then examine the additions made to it in future movies, and how those additions affected the world building of the franchise.
The Force is what gives the Jedi his power. It's an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us and penetrates us. It binds the galaxy together.
Find the rebels' hidden fort.
find your lack of faith disturbing.
You don't need to see his identification.
We don't need to see his identification.
These aren't the droids you're looking for.
These aren't the droids we're looking for.
Force can have a strong influence on the weak-minded. Remember, a Jedi can feel the Force flowing through him.
You mean it controls your actions?
Partially, but it also obeys your commands. I felt a great disturbance in the Force, as if millions of voices suddenly cried out in terror and were suddenly silenced. I fear something terrible has happened. Run, Luke, run! Use the Force, Luke. Let go.
Alright, so let's summarize those. From what we see in A New Hope, the Force is an energy that Jedi can feel and use to manipulate their surroundings to an extent. It can be used to choke people, influence the weak-minded, sense that which can't be seen, and move objects.
I just move shit with my freaking
No, not that. It also seems that Jedi disappear and become one with it when they die, allowing them to converse with other Jedi through the Force. There's a lot here, but with a half-decent imagination, it's not too difficult to wrap your head around. It's pretty constrained, but it gives Force users a definite leg up on Joe Schmo. Over the next two movies, how did George Lucas expand on it? What did he add? Not much. Episode 5 showcases more of how you can use it to push and pull objects, appear to other Jedi as a visible Force ghost, and jump great heights. It extends the sensing of that which can't be seen to sensing the future, or at least a possible future, and stresses the necessity of training to master the use of the Force. Episode 6 adds Force Lightning, which is just another way you can use the Force to inflict pain and eventually death on someone, like with the Force Choke. Let's be honest, it's just more cinematic. The point is, at no point in those three movies is a new use of the Force introduced that makes you say, wow, if they'd been able to do that earlier, a lot of problems would have been solved. Things could have looked a lot different. How about the prequels? The Phantom Menace is the first movie that does some damage. I'll actually defend midichlorians from a mechanics standpoint. You may think they're dumb, but it seems to me a reasonable explanation for how the Jedi Order determines who it trains to be Jedi, and why Obi-Wan and Yoda didn't just pick some random schmuck to make a Jedi to challenge Vader. The introduction that does damage the world building is the Force Dash we see at the very beginning of the movie. It honestly baffles me how this made it into the final cut. It's not used in any later movies, and I can chalk that up to George realizing he made a boo-boo adding it in. But what's weird is that it doesn't get used again even in that movie. It's like they were shooting the movie as George was writing it and said, oh, too bad we can't go back. But you could have. And it's very strange why this ability isn't used in any of the other movies. Especially here. In Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, I'm not aware of any new Force abilities introduced. I suppose Yoda's absorption and redirecting of Dooku's Force Lightning could count as one. The new aspect of the Force that is explored is the dark side's ability to cloud the Jedi's ability to sense through the Force. Honestly, pretty impressive. George Lucas gets a lot of criticism, and he's not above it by any means, but he should be commended for sticking to a system of rules that he set up for himself. He didn't introduce completely new abilities that change how we view the projects that came before, and he didn't blow out the scope of what you can do with the Force to make the original characters look like chumps. Speaking of chumps, J.J. Abrams. When J.J. was given control of writing a story in this world, how did he utilize its magic system? Well, right off the bat, he did this. Now, this isn't a completely brand new ability, because Darth Vader used the Force to deflect Han's blaster shots in Empire, but I'll still contend it's an issue. It's a radical increase in scope. Immediately, we're introduced to a character who, by our available evidence, is more powerful than the big baddie of the original trilogy. That's what J.J. Abrams does. He multiplies things. He makes them bigger. It's the only way he knows how to increase stakes. Force stasis, I believe, is the official name for this. And before you say it was introduced in the Clone Wars, I'm aware. It was actually dumber there because Yoda uses it on another Force user. Again, this isn't inherently a problem. I can believe it's possible to use the Force to stop someone in their tracks, But these couple of seconds make Kylo Ren seem exceedingly more powerful than any of the characters we saw before. And we liked those characters. Making them seem weak isn't a great strategy, unless you're really confident that we're going to end up liking this character as much as, or even more than, the original ones.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
The next ability introduced in this movie is Force mind reading. I do think this is different from what Darth Vader does to Luke during their fight in the throne room.
So, you have a twin sister. Your feelings have now betrayed her too.
There, Darth Vader is sensing Luke's emotions towards Leia. He doesn't pull any specific information. In TFA, Kylo pulls out of Poe's head that he put the map in BB-8. And for some stupid reason, you took him all the way back to your ship instead of doing it right here, you emo muppet. He also believes he can pull the image of the map out of Rey's mind. Another piece of evidence that these are different abilities is that Kylo seems to be torturing Poe for this. Just like Jesse in the Clone Wars. Yep, I know it's there too. Luke endures no such suffering. Again, stop making a fan-favorite villain look like a clown right off the bat. Is Vader weak? Or is he an idiot for not using this on Leia at the beginning of A New Hope? Because it's one of the two. But of course, those aren't nearly the worst perversions of the Force in this movie. There's also the, I guess, Force memory triggered by touching Anakin's lightsaber that reappears in Fallen Order and Ahsoka. The worst, though, is of course Rey's innate ability to use the Force. It takes her just a couple of tries to successfully use a Jedi mind trick on James Bond just around 24 hours after she learned that the Force was even real.
It's true. The Force, the Jedi. All of it.
You will remove these restraints and leave this cell with the door open.
Even worse, she overpowers Kylo Ren, someone trained by Luke Skywalker and this raisin from childhood, not once, but twice in the Force. And then she beats the stuffing out of him the first time she turns on a lightsaber. The Force is an abstract energy that needs to be understood on a spiritual level. At least, that's what we were taught in the first 6 movies. Giving a character insane control over it out of nowhere, especially when she didn't even think it was real a day ago, undermines the speciality of it. Maybe someday I'll make a video about Rey to add to this series, but for now we're focusing on the Force, and it's clear it was hemorrhaged by J.J. Abrams in 2015. But that was a gentle treatment compared to what Annoying Orange here did in 2017. Some of these I don't think even require an explanation for why they're so bad.
I'm Mary Poppins, y'all!
Yeah, Force Skype calls are ridiculous. Oh, Luke and Vader did it in Return of the Jedi, and Luke and Leia did it in Empire Strikes Back. No, they didn't. In both of those cases, the characters sensed each other through the Force. And in both cases, you can make the argument that the characters were family, so it isn't out of pocket to assume their bond would be strong. Those are much different than these FaceTimes that transport actual matter between two completely different places in the galaxy. Could you pull the other person through to your location? Why not? Why doesn't Kylo try that? Why does he only grab her necklace in the Rise of Skywalker instead of her arm? Why can Luke see them? Could someone have walked in on Kylo talking to Rey and shot Rey? Why is this happening? What is a Force dyad? Why did this bond form between Rey and the guy that tried to mind rape her and killed her wannabe mentor yesterday? I'll extend a challenge to my lovely audience. Anyone is welcome to explain in the comments the answers to these questions. Specifically what a Force dyad is and why Rey and Kylo formed one. But you must do so using only evidence from the sequel movies. If your movie requires 17 graphic novels to make a key tenet make a lick of sense, your movie sucks. I'm not going to hold my breath for those answers.
Bueller?
Similarly, is this Force Skype call different from Luke's projection at the end of the film? Seemingly, yes, because Luke projects a younger version of himself for Kylo. But it's not just a projection. He too is capable of interacting with the physical world. He gives Leia Han's dice that she can physically hold until they disappear. Oh, but wait, he doesn't leave any footprints in the snow.
Salt.
Oh, screw you, it's Bargain Brand Hoth. This entire mechanic is demonstrable not only of how little respect Rian Johnson has for the established rules of the universe in which he's crafting a story, but also of just how utterly incompetent he is in making his writing logically consistent. Luke dies. From overexertion, or did he actually feel that lightsaber go through him? And if he was gonna die, just have him go to crate. His X-Wing still works, apparently. But once again, this still isn't the worst bastardization of the Force in this movie. If you want a good laugh, search for justifications of this scene on the internet and watch the legwork people are willing to do. It was cloudy. Guys, it's not world-shattering because it was cloudy.
I don't think so, pal.
It wasn't even Yoda. It was Luke pretending it was Yoda. Which is why Luke was so indignant afterwards.
The sacred Jedi text!
It doesn't mean Yoda would use that ability to attack Kylo or Snoke, because he just wouldn't do that. Right, because Yoda was always anti-attacking the Sith.
You must confront Vader.
He actually is sabotaging Kylo behind the scenes by making him stub his toe. That's probably a joke, but you never can be sure with TLJ fans.
You never can tell, kid.
The lightning didn't come from Yoda, it came from the Force. Yoda asked and the Force acquiesced.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Just keeping track, our tally of how many of these explanations are in the film is still at 0. And that's why everyone has a different imagined justification. Ryan didn't even attempt to provide one. It's like unrequited love. They're simping so hard after a girl that they must convince themselves that she likes them, no matter how little indication she gives that that's true. The other justification I've seen is that because Alec Guinness sat on a log in Return of the Jedi, that means that Force ghosts can interact with their environment in the same ways as live Jedi. No benefit of the doubt that this is at worst a neglected super minor mistake overlooked so an old man could sit down for a scene, but to play their game, how do you know he actually made contact with the log, huh? Maybe he was just taking that position to look more natural for Luke. And let's not lose sight of the most important part, which is that there is a slight difference between sitting down on a log and summoning lightning from the sky to blow up a tree. Yes, remember, with no explanation, Yoda summons lightning to blow up a tree. So of course the question must be asked, why are all the Force ghosts pricks and not doing anything to help save the galaxy from the faction that just blew up 5 planets and killed billions of people? Force ghosts can apparently interact with the environment and use the Force in much more powerful ways than they did when they were alive, and they aren't bound by the physical limitations of having a body, like needing to travel by ship from planet to planet. I forget who I originally heard say this, which sucks because I'd love to give them credit for this line, but if you're a Jedi, what's the point of being alive? The further counter-argument to this is that Force Ghost Yoda is only able to do this on this specific planet because the Force is super strong here. But if that's the case, then why did Luke run here to hide and abandon his duties as a Jedi? And how was he able to literally close himself off from the Force here?
You've closed yourself off from the Force.
That's the thing about truly awful writing. When you try to fix it, you plug up one hole just for all the leaking water to spurt out of a new hole. Geez, we've been going for a bit. We still have to get through the last slimy mudhole of a movie.
Mudhole? Slimy? My home this is!
Not to mention one of the TV shows. The Rise of Skywalker tried to do some damage control on the first 2 movies. They fixed Kylo's helmet that Ryan broke, and he looked as cool as those alpha chads driving around wearing the Apple Vision Pro.
Hey, everybody look at me. I'm 1 part robot and 3 parts asshole.
They replaced Cuck Hux with basically a clone of the old version of Hux that Ryan humiliated.
I'm the spot.
It tried to pay lip service to Holdo's hyperspace kamikaze.
We need to put some Holdo maneuvers. Do some real damage.
Come on, that move is 1 in a million.
It benched sexually harassing diversity hire as soon as it possibly could.
Rose, last chance.
The general asked me to study the specs of old destroyers.
It showed raid training. It tried to stymie the damage done. Now, step 1 of that would be to not inflict any more damage. But as we saw in a previous video in this series, that endeavor didn't last very long.
What are you doing? Light speed skipping!
In terms of the Force, let's make it even bigger, making characters capable of performing incredible feats without even intending to. Also, does Force lightning require you to tap into the dark side of the Force to use? I always thought it did, but apparently not, because this angelic paragon of virtue used it by accident. Leia's death by overexertion and reaching out to Kylo across the galaxy, I suppose makes sense. But like with Luke's death, the way it's shot, I'm not sure if it's by overexertion or being stabbed with a lightsaber. Let's talk about the worst transgression of this movie, though. Yep, force healing. Earlier in this video, I said you should be careful about introducing new abilities that would have solved a lot of previous problems. Well, this one definitely fits the bill. Here's the thing about introducing new mechanics that would have nullified problems that previously had consequences. You can do it, but you have to follow some guidelines. You need to be explicit as to how it works. You need to make it clear why characters weren't able to use this mechanic before now. And just a general rule of setups and payoffs, the bigger payoff something has, the more setup you need to give it. The earlier you need to start the setup. If you don't set it up until just before you need to use it, it comes off to the audience that you wrote yourself into a corner and then invented something out of thin air to get yourself out of it. I'll give a quick example. Spoiler warning for the end of Avatar: The Last Airbender. At the end of the show, Aang must fight Fire Lord Ozai. And in the best interest of the world, he needs to kill him. It's really the only way. If he lets him live, he's powerful enough to still wreak havoc on the world. But, presumably because it's a kid's show, Aang declares that he can't kill him, as he's a peaceful monk and killing would go against his morals.
I've always tried to solve my problems by being quick or clever, and I've only had to use violence for necessary defense. And I've certainly never used it to take a life.
Ignoring the fact that Aang has killed literally hundreds, if not thousands, of nameless Fire Nation soldiers throughout the show. But everyone he talks to, his friends and his past lives, implores him that he must kill Ozai. Then, he ends up on top of a giant lion turtle, who informs him that there's actually a type of bending called energy bending that Aang can use to take away Ozai's ability to firebend, rendering him harmless. It's very difficult to justify this with anything other than they wrote themselves into a corner and had to pull something out of thin air. In the second season, they actually mention lion turtles in passing, but they don't mention anything about energy bending. So, my take is that they went back and found something they had mentioned earlier in the show to impart this world-altering wisdom to Aang. In The Rise of Skywalker, they introduced force healing fairly early on with the sandworm, but while it's not too late in the movie, it's super late in the story. We're over 8/9 into this saga. This was invented in the 11th hour so that JJ could have his cake and eat it too. JJ wanted to have the emotional payoff of Rey dying, which for me was about as emotional as I get when I realize I'll need to buy butter the next time I'm at Aldi, without actually killing Rey, because nothing can defeat Raymond. And you know what it does to every other fool that died of their injuries before this?
Making him and everyone else on Earth look like a bitch again.
But how does this mechanic even work? Based off of what we're taught about the Force by Yoda and Obi-Wan, I can understand how Force push and pull works. But this? Is the Force what gives life?
You must feel the Force around you. Here, between you, me, the tree, the rock, everywhere. Yes.
Because even inanimate objects like rocks are affected by the Force.
The rock.
I guess all we have to go off of is...
He could use the Force to influence the midi-chlorians to create life.
So, would the argument be that Rey and Kylo are influencing the midi-chlorians to create life? Okay, but then why does it seem as though it's a trade-off? Like there's only so much life that can be shared. Why does Kylo die after saving Rey? And why can't Rey just bring Kylo back to life? Again, you may be thinking of any number of cases in the EU where force healing was used or even where it was explained. But I reiterate, if a movie in its own series requires you to consume content from a whole other medium to understand something as pivotal as how the main character is brought back to life, the movie sucks. One more example of Disney shooting the magic system it acquired in the face, and then we'll be on our way. I could talk about the Force visions or echoes Ahsoka and Rey get, but those are relatively inconsequential. I want to focus on the egregious transgressions here. So let's hop over to Kenobi. Stop this. Stopping and pulling a ship down with the Force is insane power. There are a couple other examples of this, but I think you know why I chose this one. They don't care. They don't have anyone working on continuity, and if they do, they're either garbage at their job or the writers are just flat out ignoring them. It's one thing to make an original character look like a chump by creating a new character that is significantly more powerful than them. It's a whole other thing to make an original character look like a chump by having them use an ability that they absolutely would have used in a situation we've seen before. But not only a situation we've seen before, a situation that takes place chronologically after he's proven to use said very useful ability. Now, you may look at all these new Force abilities and applications and think, well, isn't it creative how they've invented new uses for an old mechanic? It takes a lot of imagination to come up with all these new abilities. Actually, it's just the opposite. Creativity is born out in a system of rules. If your imagination has no restraints put on it, then sure, it might be entertaining to you in the comfort of your own mind where your ideas make sense, but for the rest of us, not so much. In fact, I'd call the advancements in the use of the Force unimaginative and myopic on the part of the Lucasfilm writers. What do you think takes more creativity? Writing a scene in which a villain pries information from a Resistance pilot through pain, manipulation, intimidation, and cunning? Or writing a scene in which a villain pries information from a Resistance pilot by holding his hand up and saying, well, now I know what I wanted to know, because of the Force. When the scope of the magic system in your universe isn't clear, and is constantly adding new abilities and increasing in potential power, it affects what we as the audience understand as stakes. If I'm watching a movie and a character is backed into a corner by 5 guys with knives, I'll feel a lot of tension for what's about to happen. The odds don't seem too good for him. If, however, he conjures a magic gun from thin air, or the assailant's weapons disappear, then I'll be incredulous and kinda pissed off. Even more importantly, the next time a character is in a dire situation, I'm less likely to feel that tension, because in the front of my mind, I'll be wondering what sort of magical malarkey is going to get the character out of it this time.
That's a bunch of malarkey.
So, in the next Star Wars project that comes out, when a primary character seems to be put in a tough position, don't blink. Don't hold your breath. Some new power will come in at the 11th hour and bail them out. And when you want to throw your email-stuffed toaster at the TV, just do what I do. And laugh at the NPC fans who do backflips trying to justify the writing that only seems possible from someone old and cognitively declined enough to qualify them to be President of the United States. Did you like this video? No? Fine, you know what? I didn't even want you to like it. You probably pour your cereal before the tomato juice anyways.
That's tomato juice. That looked like milk to me.
If you did like it, you should check out my other stuff and consider subscribing to the channel. And if you don't subscribe, don't worry. I'll just show up at your front door eating raw chicken and washing it down with buttermilk. You know, I used the word chump quite a few times in this video, so we're going to send you off with this one.
See you, chump.